Welcome to the Bouquet Toss, the podcast that helps you plan your wedding day your way. We're your hosts, Sari
and Jessica, and in each episode, we talk with special guests, including wedding professionals, recent brides, and friends, to discuss what to keep and what to toss from your wedding day plans.
This is a Love Stories TV podcast. This episode is brought to you by Generation Tux. Get the perfect suit or tuxedo delivered straight to your door with generationtux.com. Welcome to the Bouquet Toss. I'm Sari Mayer.
And I'm Jessica Bishop, and today we're joined by Jen Glantz.
Today's episode is not just for the brides, but for the bridesmaids. What does it take to be an amazing bridesmaid? And who better to ask than Jen Glantz, a.k.a. Bridesmaid for Hire.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Before we jump into everything, I want to ask you a few quick questions about your wedding, if that's okay.
Yeah, I love that.
So when did you get married?
We got married in March of 2021, and it was a COVID cancellation wedding. So we had planned a whole 2020 thing. It got canceled, and then we just eloped.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you had to use 5 emojis to describe your wedding, what would they be?
Oh, man. I would say the definitely like a freezing ice cube, because it was a March wedding, but it was like 15 degrees. It was so cold, and I didn't want to wear a coat. I was so stubborn. So in all my pictures, I'm just pale and I'm just so cold. So I would use the ice cube. I would use maybe like a sparkler, because I didn't wear white. I wore a glitter gold suit.
Oh.
Obsessed.
I would probably use a clock, because we planned it in less than 2 weeks. We just decided on a whim to get married on the anniversary of our first date.
Aw.
I would use a coffee, because we got married outside of the coffee shop that we first met. And I guess my 5th one would be a dog, because we brought our dog to the ceremony.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh, I love everything about this. I feel like I have a million more questions just about your wedding.
Yeah,
That's
ask
like,
'em.
I mean, that's so cool. I love it when couples just do it their way. And obviously you had like some extenuating circumstances with the COVID cancellation and everything, but like what kind of led you to that place where you're like, let's just do it?
We were so stressed out, because I never knew what kind of wedding I wanted. I mean, working in this world, I feel like it's so hard to know. And I just felt pressured. Yeah. I mean, how did you figure out what you wanted?
I literally was telling Jess too, like, I feel like working in this world, it's, you know, all the options.
Yeah.
And so then how do you figure out exactly what you want? And it was really helpful that my husband had really clear ideas of what he wanted.
Okay.
So we were able to kind of like let that guide us.
Mm-hmm.
But that, like, the pressure definitely, and I also, anybody having to plan during COVID, I feel like I mean, I don't think I could have done it.
Yeah.
Like, and then having to make those decisions to, you know.
It was almost a
Postpone.
blessing, though, because I'll be honest with you, when we signed the contract for this October 2020 wedding, it felt so wrong. I was like,
Interesting.
something inside of me doesn't want to get married here, doesn't want this wedding, doesn't want this guest list, doesn't want any of this. So when I found out that it was COVID, we were like, okay, this was almost like a weird, not blessing, because it was awful. COVID was awful, but it was almost like okay, you didn't want any of this. And then when we didn't plan anything new, everyone was like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was like, we're not going to do anything. And we just eloped, the two of us, with a couple close friends. They were wearing masks, and that was it. And I don't regret it at all. It ended up being so perfect, and I never would have known I wanted that unless this happened.
Yeah.
Wow. I really do think that COVID, for, you know, all of the chaos that ensued because of it in many ways, like gave a lot of couples permission to just do things their own way and like kind of toss out all the rules, which like we're all about in general. But yeah, no, I love that story. And thank you so much for sharing that. But let's get into all things professional bridesmaids.
So it's interesting that you didn't have any bridesmaids, right?
Right.
No,
But you have a business. You're a bridesmaid for hire. I have to admit, when I hear bridesmaid for hire, I do very much think of like a stealth mission where like you are hired by somebody that like has nobody, and you show up and like have to convince the entire wedding that you are actually their long lost best friend, and not even long lost, their longtime best friend, and like it's like a spy mission.
Yeah.
And like how off am I?
No, you're right. Except that like after a little bit of that, no one really cares about me. You know, like after they're like, how do you know the bride? I'm like, yoga, how do you know the bride? And they say something, they don't care. So yeah, there's a lot of pretending, of course, but then the focus isn't really on me. People aren't like, that's suspicious. Who is that girl? They're just like, okay, I met a bridesmaid goodbye. So it's not as intimidating because eventually people are like, we don't really care who you are. But at first it is because you're getting paid to blend into someone's life.
Yeah.
And that alone is a lot of pressure because you can't blow your cover. What if you say the wrong thing? You have to pretend to know this person from a point of their life. So there's a lot of pressure, but then you ultimately get there and you're like, nobody really cares at all that I'm here.
So interesting.
I'm the most curious person ever, and I would ask a million questions. I would be the other bridesmaid who would be like grilling you, being like, "Wait, but you said you met on what date, and what month did you start going to yoga together? And like,
Can't
why
get
have I never
past
heard
Jess.
about you?"
Yeah. If I ever see you at a wedding, I'm gonna be like, I don't know you. I'm scared of you.
That's so funny. I mean, I have to ask, like, what was the catalyst for this? Like, what was the hole that in the market that you feel like you were needing to fill?
You know, it was two things. One, I was in my early 20s, always a bridesmaid for my friends. And when I was doing that, I started to realize like you put so much pressure on your friends to do what is a job.
Yeah.
And they just don't know how to do it. Sometimes they don't want
labor.
to. It's unpaid labor and they're so busy with their lives.
Are you mad at me?
Were you her
I'm not.
bridesmaid?
No, I wasn't a
No,
bridesmaid.
She wasn't a bridesmaid, but she did a lot of unpaid labor for my
Okay.
wedding.
But,
Yeah, but that's
it was like a
friendship.
gift. It was like I was happy to do it. There's
Right.
I make it as a joke.
It
It's
also, I
totally
have a
joke.
wedding expert in my life. Like, I have to take
Right,
advantage of
right.
that.
And that's friendship.
And
you know?
happily
Right.
I did it voluntarily under no duress.
Yeah. No, I mean, but you know, I started to see that like your friends just do too much and they can't do it. And then I also started to see that people just don't have friends. I mean, I was being asked by very distant friends to be their bridesmaid. And I started to think to myself, like, why me? I barely talk to you
Yeah.
anymore. We met 3 times. And that triggered this idea that people don't just need a stand-in friend, they need support through friendship. And not everyone has a close friend. You'd be surprised how many people just don't.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And people who have like the logistical and like organizational like skills and talents required to be like a good bridesmaid.
Yeah, or they just show up on time and don't cause drama, which
Yeah.
you'd be surprised how many people can't
Ooh,
do that.
girl.
The bar is
So
low.
true.
It's not
Yes.
even that high.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. That is so true. I think I'm so glad that like to hear you say it that way because it is such a like pressurized thing.
Yeah.
The second you get engaged, like feeling like, you know, I think now the question is even have a bridal party or not.
Yep.
Like way more people are opting not to.
Yep.
But then it's like, who's in it? Who's going to be upset? Like, and then there is a big level of disappointment that I think a lot of
Mhm.
brides feel when they expect their friends to show up a certain way
Yep.
for them during everything leading up to the wedding, including the day. And I don't know. I think if you haven't gotten married yet and you haven't like gone through it, you don't quite get it.
No.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Even if you're like the most incredible best friend, like I do feel like there's a learning curve and doing a little bit of research almost about like what a bridesmaid is expected to do because to be honest, there are no rules.
No.
Everybody's doing it differently. And so the only experience people have is from doing it for somebody before.
Yeah.
And maybe the person before like really relied on you and they were, you know, had a spreadsheet and said, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. And that's great.
Yeah.
Other times, like I was a maid of honor when I was young for my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I had not been in any other weddings. I had no idea what I was
Yeah.
doing. And I had to like kind of ask one of the other bridesmaids who was married herself and been in a lot of weddings, like, I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then when it came to my own wedding, I definitely do feel like I had these ideas of like, this is how my bridesmaids are going to show up for me. And I was like, oh, but did I show up that way for
Yeah.
the ones that are married? Like, you know, it's like a
that
hindsight.
hindsight.
Yeah.
But it's friendship, and friendship has no rules, no boundaries,
Right.
nothing. And then you put your friends in this high pressure situation with all these traditions and expectations, and you want them to thrive, but they often don't. And I really do think being a bridesmaid doesn't make or break friendships, but it impacts it for good or
Yes.
for bad.
Yes.
And you just see that. And I think you're never the same after you are a bridesmaid in a wedding. Sometimes you're closer to the person, but oftentimes there's like a little bit of resentment that I think could push you apart. And I see that in my own life. When I was a bridesmaid in my 20s, like, yeah, I didn't cause drama and I showed up on time, but I resented half of these people who made me a bridesmaid. I had
Yeah.
no money, but yet I was spending thousands of dollars on your wedding. I was asked to do all of these things while I was working a full-time job. I was in my 20s, you know? So things changed and there's a big shift. And I don't think people understand that. Like being a bridesmaid is still being a friend, but there's just all these unspoken things that happen.
Yeah.
There's so many expectations wrapped up in it.
So
and I
many.
think like that's what breeds the resentment,
Yep.
right? When like a bride has an idea of like what they are expecting from their bridesmaids. And then
Yeah.
if they don't communicate that in a loving and like open conversation kind of way, then the bridesmaids might be clueless
Yeah.
about what that bride is expecting of them, and then that leads to resentment.
You can't know if if you don't tell them, they can't know.
No.
Exactly.
And I think this is also like we've talked about this a lot with having a wedding planner or not, or if it's like you're planning your wedding for the first time, the learning curve for you is so high,
Yep.
and then you're kind of like disseminating some of that on people who may or may not have had the experience. And even if they did, their wedding was inherently different from yours because it just was, right? And so I don't think there's ever like a complete understanding that everybody can have of what's expected of them unless it's spelled out so clearly.
Sure.
And then, I think there's like two sides of it. And on the one hand, I think a lot of friends like the honor of being asked to do something. Like they like, that like on the day of their wedding or their friend's wedding, like they did, they set up the flowers or they, like you feel a part of it in a way. But it's like the clear as kind, right? Brene Brown. Like if you are very like much like, okay, this is what I'm expecting of you, like, or this is what I would like for you to do. Does that work for you? And then like that's the measure of success for that person, right? Like you're not saying, oh, but they didn't do X, Y, and Z above and beyond that I really wanted them to do. Like if you don't tell them, they can't know.
Yeah.
And then that way, if you do have a lot that you need help with, maybe you don't have a wedding planner, you kind of can if your bridesmaid is somebody that you do not feel bad putting to work.
Yeah. But
true.
friends don't talk to each other like this. And that's what makes it so awkward is like, I don't know why we don't. And I'm trying to be a better friend myself to people. But it's so hard to look at your friend and say, hey, I want you to do this, this, and this for me. Is that okay with you? And inside they're like, no, it's not okay with me. But they say yes.
Yeah.
And I just think that being a bridesmaid shines a light on the problems that we have in our friendships that we just don't talk about, And I think that it's tough. Like it's really tough. I think communication is such a big problem in friendships, especially, when we're right out of college and we knew that person in the college setting and now they're kind of in their new adult life. Things just change with people and it's just so complicated to have what seems like such a simple conversation.
Yeah.
It's true. I think we all have a little bit of like people-pleasing tendencies in some ways, and especially with friendships. Like you don't want to let people down, so you might say yes and take things on, even if you can't hack it like financially, logistically, physically, emotionally. Everyone's juggling so much, and it is one of those things where like when you get invited to or asked to be a bridesmaid, like you really have to weigh that at the end of the day. Can you fulfill that role and all the expectations of it? And as a bridesmaid, like if you're being asked to be a bridesmaid, I would say if you don't feel clear on what that bride's expectations are, ask, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say, like, the big bridesmaid proposal boxes, like all of those things, I think people looked at them in some ways as like, well, that's kind of silly. Like, why are you asking? They're not going to say no, right?
Right.
But they might.
They could.
And that's why, like, for me, and I didn't do any of that. I think everybody kind of knew that was going to be my bridesmaid before, I officially asked, but I was like super stressed at the time. I couldn't handle, I did want to do a gift. I actually ordered this Canva template and was going to make this really cute thing with a picture of me in each of them. And I started designing it. And then it was just taking up so much time. It was a lot. And I was like, these are my best friends. I don't think they need that. I literally sent a long email with all of them on it. But I did. I spelled out. I said, this is what being a bridesmaid will involve, because it was I was I want to have a bachelorette, and I was like, this is what I'm thinking for it. So these would be the expectations around there.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be a rehearsal dinner, and it will be on a Friday. So you may have to take off from work. I was very, very clear from the start of here's what it would mean if you want to say yes.
Dream
That's
bride.
great. Yeah, seriously. No, that is so great, because you would think that more people would do that, but they don't.
They don't.
Yeah. And because sometimes they don't really know
They
either.
don't know.
There's a lot of brides who have never been a bridesmaid themselves, or they just don't know to do that.
Yes.
It's not that common sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we should ask, what from your perspective, what can brides do to be a better bride to their bridesmaids?
Yeah. I wouldn't even ask people to be a bridesmaid before saying, hey, here's what's involved.
Yeah.
Because I think when you give them the fancy gift and you ask them the question and it's this whole thing, it's how am I going to say no to you? You know, it's so hard.
It's like a bribe. It's how are you going to say no?
Yeah, you're you just gave me a bridesmaid shirt and a photo collage. Of course I'm going to do this. So I think it's exactly what you said of hey, every wedding is different. Here's what I would expect. expect. And even if you're not sure what to expect, you can say like, I want to give you an out. Give your friends an out, an honest out of like, hey, I want you to be my bridesmaid. I know you have a lot going on. If you say no, that is okay. You are still able to come to whatever you want to come to. I'd love for you to read a poem at the wedding, whatever it is. But like, give people an honest out before you then shower them with the love. So I would almost be like, hey, here's the bridesmaid like rule book. And then if they say yes, give them all the stuff, like reverse the process a little bit. But I think if possible, I'm like the biggest advocate of this is like, don't ask your bridesmaid to spend money if possible.
Right.
Like, yeah, there might be some things you want and that's fine, but also give them an out from that, like, hey, here's the bachelorette party, but like, if you can't come to that, that's cool. We can do something local too. Like, just give your friends more outs because they don't know how to ask for those outs themselves.
Yeah.
So true. And like the guilt of feeling like I really can't do this and I don't want to say no, but I shouldn't do this financially or whatever the case might be. Yep. It's such a hard thing to weigh.
It is. But I also do think like the people that are your best friends want to celebrate you.
Yes.
Of course.
And that can often get lost for a lot of brides because they feel they don't want to put people out.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I think that was something that happened for me. I did want something a bit local. Like I wanted something in the tri-state area, and I had most of my bridesmaids were there. But I found myself constantly asking them, like, would this make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to decide on anything until everyone weighed in. And eventually they were like, Sari, it's your bachelorette.
Yeah.
Decide what you want and we're there. Like, we don't care. We'll do anything.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's like a little bit of a balance. In the same way, like, I feel like what I did and honestly, it's just because I have the knowledge of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I looked at, okay, what are the strengths of each of these people and how can that like be put to work, like both before, like during the bachelorette, during planning, and for the actual wedding.
Yeah.
Like I have one friend who she's probably been in like 700 weddings and she always does like the food. Like she puts together, like she has saved like 6 different types of grocery lists for like group share houses.
Oh my God.
Like,
I want
right?
this. She should sell
She's
this.
amazing.
Yeah.
She should. Oh my God, we should ask her for it.
Yeah.
But like Ruthie, you're amazing. I love you.
Wait, we should ask Jen how many weddings she's done.
I know.
You're saying 700.
It's not 700. Oh my God, it's not.
I know.
But like she had that already made.
Yeah.
And it was like, so for her, like that's not stressful at all. Whereas if somebody asked me to do that,
Yeah.
it would be a
Oh,
nightmare.
for sure.
Right?
For sure.
I had another friend who at my rehearsal dinner, I was like, because I'm not great at like remembering to take pictures. Either is my husband. But my friend Anna is amazing at that. She will always get the photo. Like she never, ever doesn't. So I was like, what I would like for you to do, if you're okay with it, take my phone.
Amazing. Yeah.
And for the whole rehearsal dinner, just capture everything that you can.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
And she did.
Yeah.
And like for her, that's not stressful. Like she loves to do that. She
Yep.
loves, so she was like happily, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think that doing things like that, like looking at what they genuinely are good at.
Yep.
And like, I mean, another example, like, and then I'll stop. But like my sister's kids were at our rehearsal dinner and it was like kind of like a fancy thing. And we were a little bit nervous that like my sister and her husband were not going to get to experience
Totally.
it, right? She was my maid of honor. He was our officiant. We really wanted them to also enjoy it. And I was like, 2 of my bridesmaids are amazing with kids. Thanks, Annie and Jen. And actually, Rebecca, everyone was. Amanda too. Everyone is amazing with kids.
Kid wranglers.
And I was like, let them help.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like they will be glad to
Yeah.
spend this time with your kids. And like literally Jen was on the floor like coloring with
Oh
them,
my
like in her
God.
dress, like on the
So
floor.
cute.
You know, it's
No,
like
but that's so
cater
sweet.
to their
Their strengths.
Yeah.
And these things don't cost
Utilize
money
them.
either. You're not like, hey, I
Right.
need you to pay for this, this, and this. You're like, hey, use the things that you're really good at. And I think
Right.
that's very smart.
Thank you.
Planning a wedding can be stressful, but Generation Tux understands. They've designed a suit and tuxedo rental process that you can complete entirely from home. It's easy, affordable, and trusted by wedding couples for over 10 years. Forget about store visits, last-minute pickups, and low-quality, poor-fitting suits. With Generation Tux, you'll choose from over 25 premium suits and tuxedos you can customize with hundreds of accessories and colors. Get free swatches to help with planning a free home try-on for the groom. And everyone in your wedding party gets free shipping and delivery 14 days before your wedding. Visit GenerationTux.com for the perfect suit or tuxedo delivered straight to your door.
So how many weddings have you been a bridesmaid in?
I've been a bridesmaid in over 100 weddings. I've been doing this for a decade. this month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So
Thank you.
more than Katherine Heigl in 27
Yeah. Oh my God. I
dresses.
have more dresses than her.
How many dresses? I know. I want to know how many dresses.
Oh my God. I probably, I've worn some to multiple weddings over the years.
Of course.
I don't even know how many I have, but they're in garbage bags in my in-laws' house in New Jersey. I just have so many of them. But
I'm picturing like a clothing rack with like a rainbow assortment.
Yeah.
I know. And like a one bedroom in Brooklyn. I have like no space for them. So they've been exiled to garbage bags. But I've donated them over the years. I've given them
Amazing.
to friends and I've reworn them when possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a saving grace of a lot of like bridesmaid dresses at this
Yep.
point. Everybody wants them to be like reusable, I
Yeah.
think. I shouldn't say everybody, but like getting another use out of them. I mean, at least for me, that was something I was like, they will be able to wear these again.
Yeah.
Like that was very important to me.
Mhm.
So I imagine also like, and especially if you're like the only person that they're having, is that ever the case? When
You
you're
know, often they'll have me and I'll bring other people. So they'll say, hey, Jen, I'm hiring you plus 3 other people.
wow.
Wow.
Or they'll say, hey, I already have 2 other bridesmaids. I need you to be there too.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm rarely the only one there.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, but you're right. Like, I feel like in my early 20s, when I was always a bridesmaid, I was spending more on these dresses than I had spent on anything in my closet. And that was ridiculous. Like, I was buying like $400 bridesmaid dresses when I didn't even own a $400 anything in my
Yeah,
20s or even
literally.
now.
Yeah.
And that was so tough because how are you going to say no to buying the same dress as every other person?
Yep.
But you can't really afford the dress and the alterations and the accessories and all of that. And I think now bridesmaid dresses have gotten a lot better. They're
Thank
a lot less
God.
expensive.
A lot
yeah.
less.
But back then, your options were so limited, and that was really tough to navigate.
Yeah, it was also, I think, people were less like skilled and confident in doing their hair and makeup.
Yeah.
So you were also paying for that.
Yes.
Now
Oh
it
my
feels
God.
like people are like, no, I don't want anyone else doing it.
Yeah.
Like I like how I look by myself.
Yeah, which is totally fine because that's another $300. And when you add
Exactly.
it all up, you're spending thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And it killed me in my 20s. It killed me.
Yeah.
So aside from like showing up on the day of and standing beside them and being, you know, a bridesmaid as
Yeah.
part of the wedding party, like what other things are you responsible for? What sort of things do you do?
I do everything a bridesmaid would. So I will meet with you before the wedding. If you're local, we'll go dress shopping together. I will plan your bridal shower, plan your bachelorette party, go on those things for you and with you, and talk all the time with you. Do everything a bridesmaid really would do, even virtually. And then I show up for the rehearsal dinner. I'm there for the wedding. I'm there for the next day if you want me to be there. And you do everything. You walk down the aisle, you give the speech sometimes, you really are their friend. I'd say that, yeah, the heartbeat of this business is you are hiring somebody, but to be good at the job, you kind of have to be their friend. So there is a lot of like really getting to know the person
Yeah.
and building that relationship, even though it is temporary most of the time.
Okay, you said speech. How do you give a speech about someone that you know for a few months?
Well, this is my personal strength is that I was a writer. I was an English major in college. I love public speaking. So that is my like bread and butter strength right there. So that to me is so easy. And I know improv and all of that. So I just get up there and I do like the templated thing for the person I don't know. And you just talk about, you know, lighthearted things, stories from the past that we've talked about beforehand, well wishes to them and the person they're marrying. But I love that stuff. That's like, I love that.
That's
I
so
love that.
interesting. I'm like so curious because I feel like I'm having a tough time imagining like what it is that they want to communicate that they would have somebody do it that's not
Like,
Like-
actually long term close to them?
yeah, like I feel like it like I don't know. I even said to like some of my bridesmaids, I was like, do you want to speak? Like if you do, like go ahead. Like even
Yeah.
at a rehearsal dinner or something, talk about that. Like how does that like gap get closed? Having somebody else do it.
I think that they want support. I think they want a human being who can stand by their side and be there for them, not just for photos, not just for appearance, but they really do want that genuine support. They want, okay, I got engaged. I have no one to talk to about it.
Mhm.
Maybe they have friends, but their friends don't care. Their friends are busy. So they really just want that person who has been through it before, has seen it all, but mostly won't judge them at all. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you get married or not. I don't care anything. I'm not going to judge you. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. I just want the best for you. So that's what they want. And then for the speech part, what I think it is like, yeah, they want that moment of like, okay, if I don't have a speech, maybe it's obvious that I don't really have people in my life. Or if I have this person speak, then people in my life will really think I have these genuine friendships and I have these relationships. So I think that's what they want. They want that feeling and they want it to be real on the wedding as well.
So how do you convey that? Like, do you interview them? You ask them a lot of questions? Like, what's that process like?
So I get to know them just like you would any other person on the phone, and background questions. I mean, we talk about their wedding, of course, but a lot of what we talk about is just things you would talk about to a friend, and you get to know them. So what I put in my speech, there is a lot of genuineness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of the facts are not real about knowing you from high school or knowing you from yoga class, but the art of our dynamic is true, and the art of our relationship is true. So those things are real, and that's all they want. You know, people, when they reach out and they're like, we need a 6th bridesmaid, let me hire you. I'm like, no, that is not what the service is for. Or we want somebody who's 5'6" and looks like this. No, we're not a modeling agency. We don't do that. I've turned down so much business. We are support. We are human support for people who need it. And yeah, it's weird. It's wacky. There's not a lot of people doing it out there, but there is a need for it. And I decided to fill that need. And it's scary. It's strange. You see a lot of things that are not fairy tales that have ruined my perspective of weddings and love and relationships, but it's also helped me figure it out too.
It sounds like really like you are really truly becoming their friend, and obviously you're being paid, so like that part aside, but you're accelerating a friendship through that period of their engagement and helping them get to the altar. So.
Yeah, and I will say I've felt that as like a guest at a wedding where like maybe, you know, like I've been to ones with my husband where it's like his friends, and because of COVID, I never even met them. And I, through their wedding, through watching them just interact on their day, listening to the speeches that were given, their vows, I got to feel like I knew them.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually one of the things that I was really most excited for our wedding was like the people. I mean, we were very cognizant that we wanted it to really be like people that know us and have seen us and we've, you know, seen, but like people live everywhere today. Like there's uncles, aunts, cousins that like just live far and you don't see them. And I wanted everyone to like know us like through a wedding, because that actually really does happen.
No, it does. It does. And I think also it's like the one time in your life where everyone in your life is in one room and there's a lot of pressure and stress. And maybe you don't really know the people too well. Maybe you're a guest of somebody who knows them very, very well. And I think it's an opportunity to understand their love story a little bit more. I feel really lucky from this perspective because I don't know if you ever feel this in life, but strangers tell strangers things that they don't often tell their best friends. Like if you ever spoke to a therapist or you speak to, you know, someone in the waiting room or in Starbucks or whatever it is, like sometimes you tell them things, but you're like, nobody else in my life knows this about me. And I've always been guilty of that my whole life. Like my best friends don't know me as well as like strangers I meet in Central Park. It's just the truth. And so I think friendships are faster when there's no stress of like, is she judging me? Does she really like me? And I think that's why people really just open up and tell me things that I don't think they have anyone else in their life to tell.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned before, like you've seen things, like nightmare things. Like, do you want to share some of those?
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget, like a month or two into the job, I still thought like, love is beautiful and everyone who gets married like is in love and happy. Yeah, I still like really genuinely believed that. And a couple months into the job, I worked a wedding, and after the ceremony, the bride goes missing. I find her in the bridal suite. She is blackout drunk. There's an empty bottle of vodka like shattered on the floor. She's on the floor, banging on the carpet, screaming, like, I hate this guy so much. I don't want to be here. Like kicking and screaming like she was a toddler. I just remember standing there thinking, how did I get here? Like, I'm not qualified for this at all. I have no experience dealing with this. What do I do?
Wow.
And it was just one of those like light bulb moments where I'm just like, okay, this job is not rainbows and butterflies. This job is going to be a roller coaster, and you signed up for this. So you figure it out. And from that moment, I've had so many stories like that where I just walk into a room and I'm like, how did I get here? I'm not the person who should be here right now, but how do we get through this? And that has been what the job is. There's more moments like that than I would say like sweet weddings where you're like, that was easy, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd often go home from the job and have no one in my life to talk about it to because nobody would understand. I started dating my now husband back then, and he'd be like, how was the wedding? And I'm like, I would tell him, and I'm like, this doesn't even sound real. And it was only when I started hiring employees to go with me that we would be like, it was such a bond. You're like trauma bonding. You're like, what
Literally.
did we just do? And that was so refreshing to have other people to talk about it with, because nobody else can really like understand this world that you're thrown into for an evening.
Unless they experienced it and witnessed it firsthand with you.
They don't believe you. They're like, this could not be real. And then the person's like, it's real. It happened. This really happened. So I've had many stories like that. I had somebody who 5 minutes before her wedding, she pulls me aside. She's like, I hate the groom. I don't want to do this.
How do you get to the altar and say, I hate this guy?
It happens so often.
Wow.
So often. I'll never forget, I had a New Year's Eve bride, and I was like racing for the wedding to get over so I can make it back before midnight. And right before the ceremony, she is hysterically crying. And her mom is like, literally has her hand on her back, pushing her down the aisle. She's like, I don't care how you feel. I don't care you're doing this. And just like pushed her down that aisle. And she, with her whole body was saying, no, 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 no. Like you can just feel it. And yeah, I mean, you just see that so often. I think it's like, I've never been in this situation, but I think it's like you go climb up the diving board, you're about to dive into the water, and right before you dive, you see everything so differently. And you're like, oh no, this is not right. But it just took you getting to that moment, I think. And it happens so much. The cold feet or the questioning or the realization that like, I've had somebody told me once that she walked down the aisle and she thought, wow, this is going to suck to have to do again. She just knew in that moment that this was wrong. And if you ask people who get divorced shortly after the wedding, they'll tell you that they knew. It just was easier to go along with it.
I mean, it makes sense, really. I mean, because once you've gone through all of that planning, all of the expense, the logistics, all the people are there, especially like in those final moments, to then get hit with that like sort of gut intuition. You're like, how do I not go through with this when it's all there?
Exactly.
It's like a movie scene, really.
Yeah, it actually is.
And it's real life for a lot of people. And I'm not going to judge them if they tell me that. So they tell me that. And your best friend might be like, oh, you know, maybe you're just like feeling weird. Like, it's okay. Or they might judge you for life if you go through with it and you're with this person. They might never look at that person the same way. So I think some people reach out to me just for that reason, that they want to end an engagement or they're not sure if they want to end an engagement. And that was something that I was like, I never thought that I would be involved in those situations, but it's part of the job.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I've been in like bride Facebook groups where so many people are just like posting anonymously, but just
confessions,
ads,
right?
Yes, confessionals.
Yes.
And like the whole comment section is like, girl, see a therapist. Or like, don't ask strangers, we don't know you. Or like, and it's like, but without any other context, nobody can give you like any advice, right? Like you need to actually have like an interpersonal connection with somebody to understand what the hell is going on with them. Yeah. But that is definitely common. Like it's something that we're seeing a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I feel like you should question your relationship all the time, even when you're married. Yeah. Like you shouldn't feel like I don't like the term like marriage is forever. That's great. And I really hope that I am married to my husband forever. I really do. But also I understand that that might not also happen, and that's also okay. And I think like, you know, our generation's like, I feel like a lot of people, parents like stayed together because they were like scared of divorce and all these things. And I think like now our generation and the ones below us are more like, okay, we don't want to feel tied down to something that's not right. And I think marriage is forever just sets people up for disaster because they might enter a bad situation and do nothing about it. So I think it's great to question. You should question your marriage before you get married, even if you're happy. Go see a marriage counselor. Like go do all of the work before you get married.
Yes.
Why not?
Understand why you even want to get married.
Yes, because people don't always get married for maybe the right reasons for them. So yeah, I think like question it all. Talk about it to people. Like talk about weird topics with your partner. Like all these things that we just hold inside. Like I know couples who do not talk about finances until after they're married. But what you don't understand is that when you are married, a lot of your finances are commingled and there's like things that happen because of that and it's complicated, and you should talk about these complicated topics before you get married. You should make love so ugly and messy and dirty and gross before you get married. Like why not? Why not?
I love that quote. I want that to be somewhere.
Yeah.
That's like really important.
I agree wholeheartedly, truly. And as someone who's been married and divorced and, you know, can speak to, like, not every marriage is forever. No. And that's not the worst thing in the world, you know? So.
No. And if it's not right, it shouldn't be. And I see some people who are just rushing into marriage because they're of a certain age or for all of these reasons, and they'll tell me what the reasons are, and I don't judge them. But I do hope that they question their decisions, and I hope that maybe they realize, like, all these external pressures don't have to hit them so hard if they don't want them to. So there's more, I feel like people are more open about their options in life now. Like back then, people thought, oh, I had to get married to have kids. There's so many women now who are having kids solo.
Yep.
And I love that. So I think more people are questioning marriage. I don't even know if I believe in marriage because of all that I have seen. So I just blindly got married to this guy. And,
says a married lady.
Yeah, but I was very open with him about this. And I made us go see like a marriage counselor, a divorce lawyer, like all these things to be like, hey, if we do get married and we do get divorced, like what would happen? to our finances and our life. That's important to me. So we did things a little different, but mess up your marriage before you get married as much as you can, safely, in a way that teaches you what you need to know about that person and your life together.
Yeah, I do think that that's likely a common thread with a lot of these people that you end up working with is, and it's just because of the way that like society has kind of trained us to look at like the fairy tale version of what marriage is. And a lot of people get to that point without doing the work, exactly as you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I think people do feel though that it like, then, okay, they got married, that should have been done already.
Yeah.
So like, now what?
Yeah.
But it's not like
the work never stops.
It never stops.
No.
Exactly.
Ever. And you never stop learning about your partner and each other and your own quirks and becoming more self-aware and like growing and changing, and it's never over.
No.
Never.
I will say though, people always ask me, and maybe they ask you guys this too, like, do you know if a couple's going to make it after they get married? And the truth is no, because some couples stay together for reasons that I would never stay with a person, but they are totally cool with that, and that's for them. So you can never judge a person's marriage or love story from the outside. Like, you just can never, ever do that. So I think that's a dangerous question.
Yep.
And I think, like, you honestly never know. Like, there's some couples I thought would stay together forever, and the marriage ended after a year, and that's okay. But, like, I can't tell from my perspective.
Yeah, if you don't see the future,
None of us
how are you
can.
gonna know?
Yeah. Or life's complicated. Things happen. People cheat. People get into all different
Pandemics
situations.
come.
They lose jobs. Like, all these things happen that can impact a marriage, and that's okay. But just be realistic about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah, I do think, and like we should definitely we've done episodes like this, but I do feel like we should do another episode where we really do just talk about like what marriage is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a wedding is like a ritual that celebrates the marriage, right? And it's a legal contract. It's legally binding. And there's, to your point, like women don't necessarily need to get married.
No.
But then there is also this like legitimacy that I think comes with people feeling like a relationship is legit. Like in a lot of, I feel like queer LGBTQ couples, I don't want to speak for anybody, but like I do feel like there could be a pressure to feel like, well, we have to prove that our love is, this is real. So like we want to be married. And that's, you know, you're recognized by the state that way so you can file taxes together and whatnot. But it's also like societally, culturally, you're recognized in a little bit of a different way when you have that like label that you are married to this person.
But marriage and wedding, are just like you said, are two separate things.
Two separate things.
But they're not ever talked about like that.
Right.
Two completely separate things. And I think most people might not actually know what marriage is in the sense of like what happens when you sign that legal document.
Right.
Like that is scary when it comes to finances and debt and the possibility of what happens when you get divorced. Like not everyone knows that before they get married. I don't think I knew all of that before I got married, you know?
No.
So I think like more talking about that is so important. Marriage is one thing and it's over here, and a wedding is a completely other thing and it's over here. And they kind of like barely intersect for like a second, you know?
It's literally
like,
one day.
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
And I just don't think people realize that. And that is scary to me. That is scary. And I'm guilty of that.
And I mean, I can speak to that a little bit myself because as someone who got married, like I would say fairly young, I was 25 when I got married. And I definitely was going through this period where I grew up in the South. You know, a lot of people my age at the time, like were already married. I had friends who got married before we even turned 21, you know, like people couldn't even drink at the reception.
Oh my God.
It's crazy. Like child brides, truly. And, you know, so I was actually one of like the last in my friend group to get married, but I felt like that feeling of like, oh, well, our relationship isn't serious enough until we're engaged. And like, and that's, you know, this isn't stable enough. And it really felt like this pressure to like accelerate and like move forward. So I definitely felt that. And looking back on it, I'm like 25 was so young. It's like my brain's not even fully developed yet, you know, like I don't even know who I am as a human being or what I was going to grow to do or learn over time. And so it's incredible to look back on it now and just like see how all of those external pressures played on me and just like the hindsight of it all and knowing what I know now, like I see it more, but in the moment I couldn't see it, you know?
Yeah. Oh no, it's fascinating. I mean, when you were getting divorced, did that shine a lot of light on like what marriage was?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I just wasn't at all prepared for the amount that I would grow and change over time. And, you know, becoming a business owner and like sort of like expanding like my idea of like what was possible in life. You know, I just feel like I grew in ways that I wasn't expecting and my values and priorities shifted. And yeah, looking back on it, I couldn't have known that. Like, you know, podcasting, what we're doing right now, sitting here, like as a career, like didn't exist when I was young and looking into the future of what was possible. So it's all really interesting to think about.
But, and I think it says a lot because, especially for women, people judge you by milestones in your life, getting married. And I never liked that. Like when people were happy for me getting engaged, I was like, that's great. But could you also be really happy for me that I am a business owner and I've written a book and I've done all these other things? Like judging like Facebook likes, for example, like my engagement got so many more Facebook likes than me publishing a book and like me starting a business or me even running a freaking 5K, which was really hard for me. Like I just want people to realize like marriage and your relationship status does not define your dynamic of success. Like they're just not, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people feel like that. Like they have to get married, they have to get engaged because people will see them in a certain way. But like their value is so much more, And I think like I've watched horrible things happen with marriages and relationships, and I've seen women lose everything in them. And my hope and my goal for women especially is like, always keep your life going even once you get married. Always protect your money. Always have money of your own. Like figure that out because you need to be you even when you enter this partnership. You have to hold on to that because your value is not just your relationship in life.
So true.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also part of the reason for that is like weddings are just so universal that people can, like the second you say you're getting married, like it's something that everybody and every generation can kind of grasp onto and be like, oh, this is a time to celebrate this person. We wish it was like that for, running a 5K or, any of that. But people can't relate to all of those things. And all the media we consume, everything, like, and even like, parents or, people, like most people are seeing some sort of version of marriage, of weddings, and are just we're desensitized almost. Like we understand that like it's a thing that you do and it's a thing that you celebrate.
It's a marker of like a progression in life.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think as growing up, you have all these milestones. They're celebrating like every like middle school, elementary school, like graduation.
Every graduation.
You're getting these like feathers in your caps for like all these life stages, and then you graduate college and it's like the only thing you have is like your wedding, having a baby, and then it's like you have no more milestones.
No. Except now they're like, when are you having baby number 2? And like, it's just, it never ends.
Everyone's future tripping too, because they're like, when are you doing the next thing? What's coming next?
It's so true though. That feeling that you get though, you get like this sense of like, I know I'm growing because I hit this thing. And then as like an adult, you don't know, you can't, it's harder to measure. And so that's, I also think is part of the work. Like we love to say premarital counseling, like absolutely, but also the part of the work you have to do on yourself is being able to recognize when you are growing and when you need maybe to seek out something to help you grow. Maybe you're feeling stuck, but like it's not necessarily always going to come from an outward party.
Or your relationship status at all.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because I think that's tough. Like if you're people, and that's why people are also scared to mention like their marriage isn't going well because they're scared that people will judge them and they're scared of divorce. But like divorce could be a great thing. It really could be a great thing. I'm sure it's a very scary thing, but it could be a great thing for a person who's in a bad situation. So I think talking more about that honestly is just so important because weddings are beautiful and marriage seems fun, but it's tough, it's kind of tough. And I think like talking more about the honesty of it all is so important because people get married and then they're like, now what do? I had the wedding. What's next for me? And they feel sort of like a weird depression and they don't really know what to do. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
The post-wedding blues are definitely a thing.
100%.
And I would also say, like when I was going through like the decision-making process about like ending my marriage, like talking about that with some of my close friends was very difficult because it almost feels like people are scared they're going to catch it. They're going to catch like the divorce like virus or something.
Oh, really?
Yes, literally. Like I felt like some friends just like would completely shut down. Like, you guys will work it out. You guys will work through it. I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, I don't think we can. And it was isolating. It was very difficult, and like for me personally. And so I think it's hard because people don't want to. It's like they don't want to catch those emotions or like those doubts. Like they feel like it might impact their own marriage, or it might cause them to look at their own relationship through a lens of like hearing you share your experience. So I found like the most comfort in talking to other people who had been through it and feeling sort of like the strength and like the sort of like support and like positivity of like the good to come on the other side of it instead. But it can be difficult. Yeah. And therapy 1,000% is a huge outlet for things like that. But
wow. Did you lose any friends because of the divorce?
I did, but mostly because of they were like more of like my ex's friends first. All my close friends, like I'm still, close with and stuff. But there was that period of time where like when I was going through it, they just weren't the people I could lean on necessarily the most. But everyone was always, the most supportive and just wanted me to be happy at the end of the day. So, but yeah, I would just say like the people who came into my life because of my former spouse, like I'm not as close to anymore.
Yeah.
Which is natural, I think.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think like in all life milestones, it's easy to get with people who've been through it. I know like becoming a new mom was like so tough for me, and a lot of my friends couldn't relate because they didn't have kids yet. And I was upset with that. I'm like, why aren't you there for me? Why can't, but they couldn't.
Right.
And even with divorce, like it's so hard to have those conversations with your friends because you're like, what do I say? Do I be honest and be like, oh, he sucks? But then like, it's like they don't know what to say. And it's hard, I think. And that's the problem with friendship is like we're all at a certain level with people.
I was just going to say that brought it around so perfectly because that is also endemic to having bridesmaids.
Yeah.
Right? Like unless they've been through it, they don't necessarily know. And so being able to talk with people who have been married and have been bridesmaids and understand like what goes into it is actually really an important part of it.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So to bring it full circle.
Right? I mean, that you guys did it. But I mean, that was amazing. And I think before we go, we're going to, we could have this conversation for another 6 hours.
This went in surprising directions and I loved it.
I know, we're talking more about divorce, but I love it. Hopefully my partner doesn't hear this and be like, what is wrong with you?
We need to have an emergency therapy session.
What's wrong with you?
No, I think this has all been so amazing. I would like to continue it forever.
Yeah,
but let's play a game first.
Yes. You're going to play this time, right?
I'm going to play.
Okay. So our show is all about helping couples decide what to keep and what to toss from their wedding plans. And so we're going to play a game of Keep It or Toss It. Okay. There's a cute little paddle underneath your chair. And I'm going to ask you both some rapid fire questions. And you'll say out loud as well as hold up the right side of your paddle.
Just so people listening can also know what you said if they're not watching our beautiful faces.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Ready?
Ready.
All right. So first up is clone-like matching bridesmaids dresses.
I'm going to say toss.
Toss it so hard. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend anybody, but it really makes me mad.
Does it give you the ick?
It gives me the ick.
I just think like your bridesmaids have personality. Let it come out. Like I like to see what you want to wear to the wedding. Why do I have to tell you?
And I would love for you to wear it again.
Yeah.
And like not have to buy something just for me.
Yeah.
And I also really much feel that everybody invited to my wedding is there because I love them.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to feel like there was this small group of people that like they were the only ones that mattered. So they were in like a uniform.
Yeah.
I didn't want that.
Yeah. The uniform's a really good way of putting it because it's so true. Like you would never match other people at any other person's like event.
I would be mortified if I was doing the same thing.
Normally if you show up in the same dress as somebody, you're like, oh God.
Yes. And our bodies are so different. And I think
that's the big thing.
Yeah. Like celebrate people's bodies. Let them go find something that feels good on them.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be self-conscious at a loved one's event. You
that
just
is the worst feeling.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement on this one. Okay, so next up is day of coordinator.
I'm gonna say keep. I don't know.
Yes, keep. Yes, keep. I feel like if it didn't like come with my venue, I would have been like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like you need somebody who knows all the things.
Yes.
You do. And sometimes like your friends want to be that person for you, but they also want to have fun. And sometimes if they're the ones that are like talking to vendors and doing all these things, they can't enjoy themselves. Yeah. So if you can find someone in your price point that makes sense for you, I love that for you. I really do.
Me too.
Perfect. Okay, next up is elaborate bridesmaids proposals.
We're both tossing it.
Tossing it right
I
now.
still think it's needed.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think your bridesmaids need more stuff. Like
They don't.
I've never gotten one of those boxes and been like, thank God there's like another tumbler in it. Like you don't want it.
Right, especially if it says bridesmaid on it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so next is international bachelorette parties.
I mean, definitely toss.
Oh my God, toss. I mean, unless you like live in, Europe and that's easy for you.
Yeah.
Right. The expectations around bridesmaid or bachelorette parties these days, I feel like are so out of control. When I see people going to like, what is it, like Monaco or like, I don't know. It's just, it's wild.
It's crazy.
We're talking flights, hotels,
Everything.
like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. Expectations. Okay, so next is social media restrictions for your guests.
Okay, I'm gonna say toss.
Yeah.
I think I'm tossing too. What kind of restrictions?
Like a no phone ceremony policy or something like that.
I think it's fun. I think like people want to celebrate you. Like social media is a part of all of our lives. I have seen someone in the front row of a ceremony with an iPad though above their head.
Yes.
And that was like not cool.
That's not
But
good.
like I think people for the most part are like they understand what to do and what not to do. So I would say just don't, maybe no, but
Right.
Toss.
I'm like, just don't get in the way of the professionals who've been paid and
That's
hired
the
to be
thing.
there.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that was like one of the things my photographer said, like a reason to have two people is like she shot a wedding once where like she's ready for the shot of like the first kiss and she's like there and then someone just like stood up in front of her with their phone. And it's like, if you don't have somebody else to get that, then you miss it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So true. Okay. Next up is multi-day wedding events. Like wedding weekends.
There's a part of me that would have said toss when I was like, keep everything down. But I'm saying keep. I do think obviously budget is part of it.
Yes.
But your wedding goes way too fast.
Yeah.
And anything that you have in your budget and your power to elongate it.
I agree. I mean, especially if I'm flying out to your wedding, I don't want to just see you for the event.
Right.
Like, I want to do
you're not
more
going to
things.
see.
Yeah. And also, like, you picked that location for a reason. I want to go tour it. I want to go do all these things. Like, I don't want to go off on my own. I want to be with the people. And it makes it less awkward when you go to a wedding and you've hung out with people Friday, Saturday, Thursday, whatever it is. It makes the wedding more fun.
100%.
So I'd say keep it and make some optional. So if people do want to skip them, they can.
Yes, more bonding time. Cool. So next is obligatory speeches. So like forcing your wedding party to give a speech for you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, toss. I mean, as much as I love speeches.
Okay. And then last one is strict appearance requirements. So like you can't have colored hair or like, strict makeup. Beauty.
I mean, definitely toss. I
Yeah.
think I obviously like can't imagine telling somebody like what they need to wear. But I did see a wedding once where they had a dress code for everybody, like color scheme wise.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh, that seems hard, like to ask people. I mean, it was a wide enough color scheme.
Oh, like
though.
the
There's
entire
not-
guest list.
Oh, yeah, the entire guest list.
Wow,
Oh.
yeah.
And like, I guess the bride had a really like clear vision of what she wanted. And then you see the pictures and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
They pulled that off.
Yeah.
And like, part of me is like, I feel bad asking people to do that. And the other part of me was like, if it's something they can wear again,
Yeah.
it's a cool thing. Like you feel even more involved. Weddings are shows, right?
Yeah.
Like you can compare all of it. You rehearse.
Yep, it's true.
There's, costumes.
Yeah.
And, why not? Your guests can be the actors who are part of the experience, part of the community putting on the show.
The set design.
I know. I kind of do agree
set
with you. I
design.
think sometimes it is nice. Like I've been to theme weddings or even color schemed weddings, and it's nice. I think just keep your expectations low because you will have people who show up wearing black when you said wear colors, So just keep your expectations low because people will mess up the dress code always. But I do think they are sort of fun. And you do feel like I've been to a Halloween wedding where you wear costumes. Like that's fun. That's different. So I agree. I think it's kind of 50-50.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was great.
Yay.
Thank you for playing our fun game.
It's so fun. So before we leave, give our viewers a chance to know where to find you online, everything.
You can find me at bridesmaidforhire.com, on Instagram, TikTok at bridesmaidforhire.
Amazing. This was such a wonderful
Thank you for
conversation.
having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bouquet Toss by the team at thebudgetsavvybride.com.
The Bouquet Toss is part of the Love Stories TV podcast network.
Your support for the show makes it all possible, so please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform, and follow Budget Savvy Bride on social media. As always, stay savvy and stay tuned for our next episode.
This episode is brought to you by Generation Tux. Get the perfect suit or tuxedo delivered straight to your door with generationtux.com.